Okay, let's talk about today's dev blog, the global Plex market and friction. It's not even, don't even worry about derailing me. Maybe people need a little break from eFrontiers. That's fine. We can get back into it. Maybe we'll see if the carbon respawns. But all right, so today I want to talk to you about this dev blog, Global Plex Market and Friction-Free Trade. It is a pretty big change to the way the EVE economy works. This seems to be directly talking about, like, CCP Okami has been talking about one of their biggest problems is people hoarding Plex, and they want to stimulate more people freeing up their Plex and trading in Plex. And this kind of plays into it. Now, they have tried this kind of thing before, but it kind of quietly got shuttered without very many people noticing it. So I think that we have some things to talk about. So let's go ahead and read this first, and then we'll go into the details. Powerful Capsuleers. EVE Online is fundamentally about creation, trade, destruction, and the friendship forged along the way. Our strategies lean into the themes of ultimate science fiction, strong organizations, future of war, and unbridled agency, threads that run through everything we build in the game. These are those 4 pillars of the game that we kind of keep going back to. They iterated on these, but this is kind of where they're at right now. Through unbridled agency in particular, we aim to support personal ambition in a hyper-capitalistic future society where players freely choose their path, express personal and group identity, and shape the universe through their actions. Player organizations run the show, as on the battlefields, so on the trades fields, fully embracing this progression in the sandbox MMO. So today, we want to share the next chapter of our economic vision for New Eden, one centered around friction-free trade, fairer access to utility goods, and the future of Plex as a liquid currency that powers gameplay and EVE Online's free-to-play business model. Just in case people do not know, Plex is EVE Online's premium currency, right? So 99% of all of the Plex in the game comes from people paying CCP money. You can either buy a month of game time for $20, or you can buy 500 Plex for $25, and 500 Plex can be used to buy a month of game time, right? So there's a little bit of a premium to buying and trading in Plex, but Plex is also used for a lot of other things, including buying things on the Nest store. So things like the skins from CCP, player certificates, skill extractors, those kinds of things also get bought with Plex. And also anything involving the Skinner tools. Hold on. Things involving Skinner also require Plex to kind of power it. So pretty much any skins in the game, or at least like non-event skins, usually require some sort of Plex in order to get. So over time, Plex has had increasing utility added to the game, which has had the, I guess, unfortunate consequence of making it more valuable. Now, Plex does offer a very interesting secondary value, which must be noted, which is the fact that, like, almost every MMO, almost every MMO has issues with gold sellers, right? People who somehow like extract resources from the game, either through some form of farming or whatever, and then sell the currency to other players in black market kind of ways. And these are very destructive to a lot of currencies, or, to a lot of MMOs. And EVE Online, given the fact that it is about its economy, EVE Online is far more vulnerable to things like gold sellers than other games, right? Like in WoW, you can buy gold, but there's only so much you can get with gold because of the fact that WoW and other MMOs like WoW function off of items that are bind on pickup. Like, gold will only get you so far. They can devalue the currency and make it so that earning gold on your own becomes not a valueless proposition, but a less and less valuable proposition because there's more and more of this currency in system We see giant goldflation. This leads to currency accretion, where they have to introduce new currencies to make older currencies obsolete, and all these other things. That EVE Online would be very destructive if it had these problems in EVE. Even minor versions of these problems are very destructive to the way EVE works, given the fact that EVE Online in general doesn't have things like bind on pickup, and doesn't have things like expansions that make old expansions obsolete, right? Like, they do add new things. There are expansions. I'm not saying that there's no power creep in EVE, but if you built a Roke in 2008, that Roke is still in the game. Oh, shoot. Haha. EVE Frontiers has a cluster shutdown in 14 minutes. So I guess we're done playing EVE Frontiers for now. Either way, so that's fine. We'll keep talking about this then. So the point is that the idea of gold sellers or ISK sellers in EVE, where people would sell ISK for real life money, RMT, it is something that's incredibly, incredibly dangerous to EVE Online for a couple reasons. One, like I said, people could figure out ways to power farm ISK and then sell that ISK to other players, which will flood the market with ISK, which will make everything kind of, it'll hyperinflate the economy. That is a big risk. But also the problem is as soon as you start getting ISK, the ability to sell ISK for money, right? Now people have a real life financial desire to gain ISK as fast as possible, which leads to incredibly negative behaviors in game when it comes to how they farm gold or ISK, like the old Chinese gold sellers or Chinese gold farmers in WoW. But also like not only in-game activities, but also just illegal activities. One of the things that happens, there was a period of time where I think it was the majority of all credit fraud online was WoW, because people were hacking players' accounts and stealing their gold so that way they can turn around and sell it to people, right? As soon as you start putting real life value on this stuff, that people can turn it back into real life value, then you start running into these problems. This is actually one of the concerns that I have with EVE Frontiers, but that's a conversation for another day. The point is that the gold sellers or ISK sellers, RMT, is a real threat to EVE Online. Herein comes PLEX, right? So somebody who's doing, for gold selling, for ISK selling to work, you need to have people who are willing to sell that ISK, but also people who are willing to buy the ISK, right? So, it's a two-sided coin. You can go after the producers or you could go after the purchasers. And PLEX offers this really nice solution to the problem, where if someone is willing to pay real-life money for ISK, they have a valid solution. This is like, keeping honest people honest, right? So you no longer, if you want to get ISK and you have money, you no longer, if you want to wallet warrior your way through it, you don't have to buy it from black marketplaces. There is a valid way of doing it. You pay for money for ISK, or sorry, you buy PLEX, and then you sell the PLEX on the market. And then there are players that have ISK. There are people that play this game a lot, that have advanced themselves into the game and have invested in the game enough, that have the play time to generate the ISK. They may not have real life money, right? Like they may be college students or even, younger, and they have plenty of play time. They can grind all day, but they don't have any real life cash. These are the people that really stimulate a lot of the activity in the game. You want them to be able to play the game, but maybe they can't afford the sub price. So now you've got people that can't afford the sub price, but are playing the game. And you've got people who don't have a lot of time to grind for ISK, but want to be able to play the game and have real life money. So those people with the real life money can buy the PLEX and sell it to the people who play the game a lot. And so the people who play the game a lot can fund their account through in-game effort. And the people who don't want to put in the in-game effort can still get what they want with ISK. Great. So you have this legal method of wealth transfer that kind of supports both sides of that coin. And this is probably one of the greatest weapons that they have against RMT. You know, I'm not saying that RMT is completely solved, but I'm saying that, like, this ability to keep honest people honest puts a cap on that problem, right? Now, if there's consequences to doing things like buying things through RMT, you might as well buy it the legal way, right? So that is kind of the fundamentals of what makes PLEX useful. However, you know, over time, CCP has added more and more things to PLEX that makes it utilitarianly useful, right? Skill extractors, skins, all these things that we were just talking about, which means that the value of PLEX continues to go up. And more importantly, because the value of PLEX continues to go up, PLEX becomes a really good investment tool for people who are trying to, you know, hold up their stuff in long-term investments. It has been a kind of a known thing since as long as I've been playing that, you know, if you want to store your ISK, if you want a good long-term investment, PLEX will, on the long term, always kind of creep its way up. So turning your ISK into PLEX, you know, PLEX becomes a very good commodity for trading between players. However, over the last few years especially, we've seen this increasing pressure on CCP because, especially with Skinner, I would say. I think that Skinner was the straw that broke the camel's back because, you know, people were able to buy skins from CCP for PLEX before, but now that people can just build whatever skins they want, this really puts an extra pressure on people to have a lot of PLEX and to store PLEX and to put value in PLEX. And so, you know, you see this, the value of it creep up. Skill injectors actually was another big one. But the point of the matter is that it's now gotten to the point where CCP is trying to figure out how to make PLEX a more functional currency that allows people to trade in it and maybe prevent hoarding of PLEX. So that's a lot of what we're looking at here. So we're gonna look at what they have to say now. So today we want to share the next chapter on our economic vision for New Eden, one centered around friction-free trade, fair access to utility goods, and the future of PLEX as a liquid currency. TLDR, a major update to PLEX trading is coming soon with the introduction of Global PLEX Market, a new global market region integrated into the existing market, allowing capsuleers to buy and sell PLEX from anywhere in New Eden. This friction-free system aims to boost liquidity, enable fair market equilibrium, and support EVE's evolving economy. Test the changes on Singularity and prepare for launch. As part of these releases on Tranquility, all existing orders will be canceled and fees reimbursed. The exact date will be announced ahead of release. So, you know, as I said, PLEX has been like the commodity to trade for as long as I've been playing this game. And as I mentioned kind of at the offset, like CCP has experimented with this idea before. So back in, I think it was 2018 or 2019, CCP produced their own mobile app, right? Their own, you know, there's always been mobile apps as long as there's been an API. In fact, one of the reasons why I got into the group that I got into was because there was this old app called Aura, which allowed you to keep track of your skill plan and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, obviously there's only so much that an app can do. And so CCP produced their own application for Android and iOS called the EVE Portal. And one of the big functions of this EVE Portal was that you could buy and sell PLEX in JITA. Now, JITA was the main place, obviously, for people to trade PLEX. In fact, trading PLEX in and around JITA is one of the things that really made the Tranquility Trade Hub in Perimeter as big of a deal as it was. But the point is that they made it so you could trade PLEX from in JITA from anywhere. And of course, PLEX doesn't need to be transported like a lot of other things because you have your own PLEX wallet. PLEX can be pulled in and out of the PLEX wallet pretty much freely. So, you know, anybody who ever gets caught and blown up with PLEX in their cargo hold is silly because you could just put it in your PLEX wallet. So PLEX has been for quite some time this thing that exists outside of the normal mechanics of EVE Online. And this idea of EVE Portal kind of stepped this up another notch, where you didn't even need to have somebody in JITA to trade in it. You could just trade in, you can buy and sell Plex straight out of the app, right? But eventually they stopped supporting the EVE Portal app and it got shuttered. And with it went away this method of trading Plex more freely. Enter CCP Okami in the last few months, like during FanFest and after. He talked about the fact that they are interested in looking at the ways that Plex gets traded and seeing whether or not they can do something about the ever-rising price of Plex and make it so that it becomes more of a traded commodity instead of a more hoarded commodity. Enter their next attempt at making Plex something that gets traded more often. Is this going to make prices go down? It should. This should absolutely make a downward pressure on the price of Plex, right? Okay, so the long-term goal is to ensure that the EVE economy works for everyone, veterans, newcomers, and everyone in between. This means reducing artificial barriers, minimizing rent-seeking behavior, and improving access to goods that support your progression, convenience, and identity in the game. What is this? Oh, it's Wikipedia for rent-seeking. Rent-seeking is the act of growing one's existing wealth by manipulating the social or political environment without creating new wealth. Rent-seeking activities have negative effects on the rest of society. So basically, attempting to manipulate the economy in such a way that increases your wealth without actually producing any extra value for anybody else, like rentals, right? So in this sense, like by hoarding Plex, they increase the value of Plex without actually increasing any utility of that Plex. As stewards of New Eden's economy, CCP acts as both custodian and regulator, a central bank of sorts. And like a central bank in the real world, we care about economic health, access, and stability, tirelessly working on reducing economic friction and uncertainty. Plex plays a foundational role in this system, but over time, as discussed in a previous blog, this is where they talked about it. Yeah. They said, over the past few years, we've steadily added more... let's talk Plex. The primary currency of the nest, the backbone of the player-driven trading, and for many, a long-term investment vehicle. It is no secret that Plex plays multiple roles in EVE, and right now, those roles are colliding in ways that we believe deserve both attention and action. Over the past few years, we've steadily added more products to the Nest and the Paragon Hub. This means more ways to use Plex, which is good, but it also puts more pressure on the supply side of the equation. Like we are seeing now with it being one of the lowest the market has ever seen. At the same time, Plex has developed a kind of stock market appeal, especially among veteran players who see it as an asset to hoard and flip. The result? A large, ever-growing, slow-moving float of Plex held in wallets across New Eden, leading to less liquidity on the market. Now, the other thing that's worth noting about this, before we get too deep into it, is you got to realize that from a business standpoint, this is also very, very, very bad for CCP. Plex to CCP on a business level is a liability. Because if you think about it, every 500 Plex that's in the system is the availability for somebody to get a month of game time without paying CCP any more money. Right? CCP's already made the money. They've already been paid the money for that Plex, but they don't get to really count that money until the Plex gets spent, right? Because it's still sitting there as a liability. It's untapped potential. So the more Plex that remains out of circulation, the more that Plex that remains in players' wallets, the worse it is for CCP's bottom line. This is one of the things, like, I know Oz especially calls them out for this. You know, there's accusations of them doing big Plex or big sales on things that you can spend Plex on about the time of like quarterly reports in order to kind of shore up their numbers. Because again, the more Plex that's in people's Plex wallets and not being spent, the worse that is for CCP. So keep that in mind too. Like, they are absolutely encouraged to fix this problem on a level that is not true with almost anything else in the game, right? If people use Svitpools too much, that isn't actually affecting CCP's bottom line. But if people are hoarding large amounts of Plex, that can really hurt them. So, all right. Incoming Plex ammo. Gold ammo. Yeah. No, wait. Don't cancel me. This limited availability, especially during rare sales or high activity events, creates volatility and drives up ISK price of Plex. That volatility can destabilize the broader player economy, contributing to inflation and making the climb steeper for new and returning players who rely on Plex to access Omega or other NES items. We know that this is not sustainable. We're actively working to ease the pressure. What we've done so far. Air daily goals now include Plex as a permanent reward, creating a steady stream of accessible Plex for active players. Seasonal events increasingly feature Plex in their seasonal reward tracks. Occasional Plex gifts mark special milestones and in-game events. Mysterious Galnet Crates 1 and 2 featured in Twitch drops and tradable in in-game market also offers a chance at Plex. So they've started introducing Plex into the game through more methods than just people paying them money, which is good for trying to stimulate that price of Plex, but it's definitely not good for CCP's bottom line, right? Because it used to be that every Plex that existed in the game existed because somebody paid them money. Which, remember, to them, Plex equals money because people can spend Plex instead of spending money in order to sub their account. So, you know, this is a fairly risky plan for them in order to alleviate this pressure. These steps help, but we know that they're not enough. We're exploring additional tools and mechanics that can rebalance the flow of Plex, making it feel like less like a speculative asset and more like a practical, fluid currency that powers your in-game choices. So what comes next? Whatever changes we make, we aim to open doors for new pilots, close loopholes for armed tiers, and shake loose some of the unhealthy speculation that's built up around Plex over time. Because in EVE, it is not the richest who survive, it's the smartest. So this is what they said 2 months ago. Let's look at what their solution is today. But over time, as discussed in the previous blog, its function has drifted. It's increasingly treated as a long-term investment or speculative asset rather than a flexible, fluid currency meant to empower player choice. Like I said, this has been true as long as I've been playing the game, but it has become increasingly true over time. What if you could charge weapons with Plex? Okay, I'm done. I'm done with you guys. That dynamic distorts pricing, limits access, and creates artificial scarcity that benefits a few of at the expense of many. We've committed to fixing that without resorting to harsh measures like inventory taxes, price hikes, or product removals. Instead, we're focusing on a system-level change that moves us closer to a healthy, fair market equilibrium. A philosophy rooted in progression, convenience, and identity. Every change made is grounded in EVE's core monetization pillars. I may not know much about RMT, but every time they bring it up, it feels like a talking point that they don't understand. I think it's like Noisy. I think that part of this is that you got to remember that MMOs are 25 years old now. In the grand scheme of things, that's nothing. This is new technology. These are social structures and social problems that are still incredibly novel. I think that you're right. They don't understand it because I don't know if anybody fully understands it. Like, we all have our theories about it, but we're all just trying to figure out something that is in the history of mankind fairly new. Like, we can apply the old, okay, well, by the way, Noisy Gamer is an incredibly thoughtful and informed player who does a lot of really interesting analysis about CCP as a company and their financials and the economics, as well as the economics of EVE Online. I strongly recommend you check out Noisy Gamer's blog and take what he says seriously, even and maybe even especially if he disagrees with me. So I just want to point that out too, since we're having this discussion. But yeah, so the old Plex was much better for on paper. If you didn't use it, then the other option was selling it or moving it somewhere else. Yeah, well, I mean, yeah. In theory, the old Plex, when Plex only was used to sub your account, then you had the concern about, if it's about PvP, always listen to Ash over you. Woo, never mind. I appreciate it, Noisy. It is true that, like, in the original days of Plex, you were kind of betting on the popularity of EVE Online, right? If people didn't need to sub their accounts, then your Plex would not be as valuable, right? It was kind of the weight of people who want to sub their accounts versus people who want ISK, right? But over time, with the adding of free to play and the addition of skill extractors and skins and Skinner, you're no longer necessarily banking on that, right? You can actually increase the amount of Plex that's needed by the player base without actually increasing the player base. In fact, we did see this in the financial reports around the 2020 era, where even though we saw a dip in the number of active players, we actually saw an increase in CCP's revenue as the players were spending more money per person because there were more meaningful things to people to invest their money in. And in this case, when we talk about money, Plex is that intermediary of that money, right? So that is a very good point. The funny part is that the player base was very large during the Apocrypha time. Apocrypha was a lightning in a bottle that everyone has been trying to recapture ever since. So, yeah. All right. A philosophy rooted in progression, convenience, and identity. Every change made is grounded in EVE's core monetization pillars. Progression, enabling you to move forward at your own pace. Convenience, making essential systems intuitive and accessible. Identity, giving you a meaningful way to express who you are. The philosophy has guided past changes such as introducing soul-bound MCT to reduce hoarding and speculation. So actually, this is something that people, for a comparison, Plex in online is the same as EVE coin in Frontier. That's actually probably a fairly, it is definitely comparable. Yeah. So this is actually something that we've talked about when we look at packs from CCP. So there are multiple character training certificates. So multiple character training, normally you've got 3 characters on your account. You can only train 1 at a time. A multiple character training certificate allows you to train an extra skill queue per account, right? So you can train 2 or 3 of your accounts at the same time, or your characters on at the same time. However, over time, more and more of the packages that come with this stuff have come with MCT, not MCTC, not certificates. So it used to be that you'd buy the pack and that multiple character training certificate could just be considered extra value because you could then turn around and sell that thing. But with it being soulbound, it applies to your account automatically. You're not allowed to sell it to anybody else. So now you either see the value in a second character training or you don't. You can't just turn it into ISK, right? Making skill books globally accessible to support new players and specializing their chosen careers. So originally, all skill books had to be bought from NPC vendors or found in like exploration or wherever else. Eventually, they made it so that all of the skill books that could be bought from vendors, like NPC buy orders, you can now just buy them out of the UI in the skill window. Now, there's a 30%, I think, markup there, which makes it so it's still valuable to hunt down the skill books if you can. And there are some skills that can only be gotten through skill books because they have to be acquired through exploration or LP stores or some other method. But the vast majority of the day-to-day skills that people purchase, they can just now buy out of the skill browser. That's what they're talking about there. Taking early steps towards regulating LP trading. So, you know, this was something that was asked for a very long time. You know, LP is something you accrue over time by doing missions or faction warfare or whatnot. And now they've made it so that you can donate your LP to the corporation, and then I think corporations can trade LP from one corporation to the other. Either way, they've kind of loosened up the idea of LP trading. I don't think that they've gone full ham with it yet, but they've definitely made it so that, like, just the fact that you can donate it to your corporation or the corporation can tax it has now made it into kind of this communal thing not just an individual resource that a lot of people, let's be frank, just let it kind of build up, right? Oh yeah, stuff for wormholes are coming. Okay. Unlocking a path for artists and skindustrialists, enabling careers for personalization via skins, logos, and design assets. This has been pretty cool. You know, I think that the Skinner tool is... What's interesting is what I have found is that the Skinner tools have been very popular. We've had several people that have really gotten into it and loved it. I know Punch, for example, like most of his gameplay at this point is just thinking about and creating cool looking skins. But I would say that the actual skin market has not been as popular. So making new skins in the Skinner tool has gained some popularity, but the actual act of like people buying skins, they haven't quite gotten there yet. So, and I think that Punch would definitely agree with me on that one. Making people more interested in buying and trading these skins, I think, is a big step. That hasn't happened yet, I would say. And then making select expert systems tradable on the regional market. Expert systems are an additional way for somebody to kind of bootstrap their progression in the game. Now, instead of just buying Omega and training or buying skill points and injecting or whatever, you can buy an expert system, which gives you access to certain skills for a limited amount of time. A good example of this is actually indeed, the market is not good, very hard to sell, even mostly good stuff. Yeah, I agree. And I've watched Punch kind of struggle with this, where he's come up with stuff where I've shown it off, people love it, nobody buys it. So, which is weird because like, some people talk about how Skinner stuff is too expensive, but like it's comparable with the skins that are on the normal Nest store. It's just there's something about going into the Skinner market, like the Paragon Hub, and choosing a skin that you want and purchasing it for your own ship. This has just not become part of the way that we play the game yet. I wish making cheap. The thing is that like I said, the prices are pretty comparable to what people pay on the Nest store. And what's weird is that people do buy things on the Nest store. You see people with Nest skins all the time. There's something about the freedom of the market of the Paragon Hub that causes people to not go and look at them. I think it has something to do with the fact that when you open up your ship fitting, you can go and look at all of the different skins that are available for it, and you can click on them, and you can click on the thing that immediately like it shows you what you can buy for PLEX, what you can buy for ISK, and you can kind of preview them all right there. And so you pick which ones of those. Well, there's the bundle ones too, but I'm talking about the ones that are just on the Nest store. What I think is happening, if we could have a little bit of an aside, is that, like I said, people are pulling up the fitting tool and they're just looking at the skins and they're like, okay, which of these skins do I like the most that I can afford, right? And that is kind of where they're getting their idea from of their skin. Whereas the path that leads them to go look on the Paragon Hub for a skin isn't quite as well established right now. I think that that's a big part of it. But yeah, paralysis of choice is a big part of it too. But I think like right now, the Skinner system, as it shows, usually boils down to like there's 2 or 3 different choices that you can make, and you can go look at the market and be like, oh, I really like cold iron. Oh, that's really cheap. I'll get that one. And that's it. That's how you make your decision. Yeah. Having a Paragon Market place button in the skin browser might be a good thing. It is there. There is a button, but it just brings you to the Paragon Hub. It doesn't let you showcase a bunch of the skins from the Paragon Hub in that one, in your fitting window. There's an extra step there that then people go and then they see. The other problem is, here's the other problem. When you're looking at the skins in your fitting window, you don't see the prices, right? You look at the skins and you kind of get in your head which skin you're kind of into and which skins you don't really care about. And then you click on them to go and see what the price on the market is, right? You're like, oh, this one looks really good. Oh shit, that's like 2 billion ISK, never mind. And so then this other one that's like only 30 million ISK, okay, well, I'll get that one then. Whereas every skin that's presented to you in the Paragon Hub has the price right there on it. So I think that people are allowing the prices of, like, they'll look at all of the different skins and all the different prices, and that just makes their brain shut down. Right? Now I want McDonald's. What is this page? This is the dev blog for the new global PLEX market and friction-free trade. Okay, either way, enough of that. Nest skins are shown in space lighting. Skinner is not. The lighting is not reflective of space. That's true. But I'm not sure how much that's actually that's affecting skindustrialists and their ability to make cool skins. But I'm not sure how much it's affecting the players that are choosing the skin. Because I don't even know if they're getting to that point, because they don't even open it up to look at the skin. They're just looking at them. Like, if they do look at anything, they're just looking at the list of all of the different skins and their prices. And they're like, I'll just get cold iron, right? All right. Either way. Expert systems, regional market, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Friction-free trade and the value chain. At the heart of EVE is a player-driven economy, a web of interconnected value chains. Every feature should strive to be a part of it while being exposed to the ever-present risk, from exploration and harvesting of raw materials to industrial research and production to hauling and trade, to solo PvP and massive fleet fights. Every step adds value, creates emergent gameplay, and generates derived opportunities across and within that ecosystem. Rare loot for explorers, margins for industrialists, and in the end, satisfaction to the end user. Trading then drives the value exchange of labor across multiple currencies. But not all goods in EVE follow the same life cycle. There are a lot of moving parts in this value exchange. Over time, we've developed internal classifications for the various types of economic objects in New Eden. Let's break them down. Player-made goods. Ships, modules, rigs, boosters, anything manufactured and value added by you from the ground up. These items reflect skill, risk, and market interaction with a desired and expected utility, fairly estimated item value, and transparent price. Utility goods. Items like PLEX, skill books, MCT, skill extractors, expert systems, introduced by CCP and tradable when not soulbound. This carry little to no player added value, yet often generate profits through arbitrage and speculative investment. This is not part of the value chain. It extracts margins without contributing. These goods should be accessible as their utility demands, which means eliminating unnecessary trading friction. Skip to the next chapter if we got your attention here. What's interesting about this is true-ish, right? Like, let's look at skill books, for example. Skill books, as we just said, or as I said a little bit ago, it used to be that all skills were done through skill books, but now you can buy some skill books, or a lot of the skill books, from the actual UI itself. However, there's a 30% markup in that. And the reason why this is because there are people who just buy skill books and bring them because skill books are not just sold everywhere universally. They're sold by the various corporations that develop that skill, right? So different empires have different skills that they specialize in, different corporations have different skills that they specialize in, et cetera, et cetera. So for instance, one of the things that was a big consideration when they made this change was there are people in nullsec that literally go to highsec, buy all the skill books up, and then bring them over to their nullsec group and resell them to their own people. And so that is player added value because it's the convenience of location. This is that logistics and transportation side of things. So this isn't necessarily always true. It's not like skill extractors where, you know, if I buy a skill extractor with Plex and then turn around and sell it, I haven't actually done anything besides just turn Plex into skill extractors, which everybody can do. There's a certain amount of like the logistics of it could theoretically be a value there too. But I can see where they're pointing out the problem here. Digital goods. These represent identity and expression, apparel, logos, CCP-made skins, and design elements. Many digital goods suffer from the limited discoverability because they are treated like physical items. And here there is an important distinction between physical goods, the manufactured items that need to be hauled, fitted, and may be lost, versus personalization assets that confer no combat advantage by being available on demand in the universe. When you want to swap a logo, put on leather boots and a pair of sunglasses, or find a legacy skin you've always dreamt of on the market without spending an hour acquiring it, you should be able to. So this is actually an interesting point. One of the very first, like back in the day, one of the fundamentally important cornerstones of EVE was that everything was destructible, right? And the very, very, very first niche in that universal truth was clothing items. This goes back to the Summer of Rage, which I've done videos about and all that stuff. And it also is worth noting that clothing items were the very first thing that kind of took Plex that wasn't game time, right? I don't think that these things being like these things, this is not a coincidence, right? So when they first started selling clothing to us, there's this problem where it's like, they're going to sell us a $60 monocle. People didn't want that $60 monocle to just be able to be destroyed. So they had to create this balancing act between their, like, everything is destructible and I spent real life money and I want to make sure that I'm safe in that investment. And in the end, when it comes to clothing items, what they decided was clothing items that are on you can be are safe, right? There's this one time that we were evacuating some stuff from LowSec, and there was this shirt that happened to be pretty valuable, and I needed to move it from one place to another. Now, I could have just thrown it in a hauler and like quickly tried to get out of there, and it probably would have been safe. But probably safe isn't the same as actually safe. So I go into the customization. I literally put the shirt on my character. I then move to the other system, and I open up the customization, and I switch it back to my other outfit, right? And that drops the shirt back into that inventory spot. So now I'm able to move that shirt without any risk of it being destroyed. This was the very, very, very first time that this was possible. And it was the very first compromise when it comes to this idea of anything destructible. Now, the most extreme example of this is actually what we mentioned earlier, which is the Plex wallet, right? I can buy Plex in Jita while I'm in nullsec. And, you know, I can even buy it with my Jita alt, a totally different character, and it goes into my Plex vault. Nothing can happen to my Plex in my Plex vault. And then in nullsec, I can pull that Plex out of my Plex vault and then sell it on the market there. So I can transport it from Jita to nullsec for free instantly without any risk whatsoever. This is completely anathema to the original mentality that everything is destructible. By the way, that's the proper use of anathema. For those of you who don't know about the Mars exploration ship. Either way, so this is an interesting thing where, like, we have over time accepted this as an aspect of the game, but it does mean that there's these weird half compromises with things like clothing items, where it is technically destroyable if you put it in your cargo bay, but it's also technically invulnerable if you put it on, whereas Plex is technically destroyable but you're dumb if you put it in your cargo bay. Either way. And then, of course, logos are even more interesting because logos are completely separate from the rest of the economy. You cannot buy logos with money. technically speaking, you can buy things to turn them in for Paragon or Evermarks, and then use that to buy logos. But like, you can't trade logos. You can't like when you buy a logo, you're buying it for yourself. Period. With a currency that cannot. Once you have Evermarks, there's no real way to turn Evermarks into anything that's any. No, I do not pronounce. I'm a good Catholic. I know how to pronounce an anathema. I know it bothers me when people. No, it's an anathema. Any rate, all right. So, singletons, in a term for player-made items that have a unique identity. These include artisan skins, abyssal rolled items, packaged ship fittings, and more. So, you know, NFTs, non-fungible tokens, things that are individualized. Artisan skins are traded in the Paragon Hub, while others are currently traded through contracts, and their complexity limits trade volume. By elevating these items and making them easier to discover and use, we can drive these specific value chains, such as blueprint research and invention, abyssal, and more. Which is actually an interesting point. I hadn't really thought of this yet, but, you know, artisan skins kind of fall into the same problem as abyssal mods, right? If you're looking for an abyssal mod, like you can sell abyssal mods on on contracts, but there's very little in as far as like discoverability tools when it comes to selling abyssal mods, which makes it very difficult to sell abyssal mods. Now there is websites now which allow you to like trade, like you can search all of the abyssal mods that are on contracts. So you can like look for, I'm looking for a web that has a range of at least 15 kilometers. Like you can do that better. So there are some discoverability tools for abyssal mods, but they're basically unsupported in game, which makes them very similar to artisan skins. It is intended not only for trade goods, but also ideas, concepts, and support materials that are often hard to find. These can be player-made guides and useful objects such as ship fittings and skill plans, where the hub can act as a modern browsable and searchable e-commerce platform with voting, favorites, recommendations, and eventually even third-party integration, like that abyssal selling. The contract system is extraordinarily old. While we're not replacing contracts anytime soon, our long-term vision is to connect systems like contracts and the market with the Paragon Hub, giving you better tools to find and share what you need. Currencies and quasi-currencies. ISK, LP, PLEX, and skill points. You know what's another interesting thing here? Is that this also includes, there's this weird hybrid of this, which is the gambling thing. The Hypernet, right? While the Hypernet does trade in things that are fungible, each individual Hypernet offer is individualized. And so I find it very interesting, like the decisions that they've made in some of these things. Like, so in the Paragon Hub, when you go look in the Paragon Hub, what you'll see is you'll see the latest things put up first. So, you know, if you put up a skin and it doesn't sell right away, it'll quickly kind of fall behind other people who's put up their own skins. It's not based on price or anything like that. Whereas like with the Hypernet, it actually has this interesting tool where it gives you kind of a random assortment of things to look at, to kind of see, like, because it's designed to try to catch your eye. So maybe we could do something like that where like 5 or 6 of the skins that are on the Skinner, the Paragon Hub, are visible on the fitting tool, you know, random or whatever, just to give people a little bit more discoverability. Currencies and quasi-currencies. ISK, LP, PLEX, and skill points are not only used to trade, but are also used for trade, but are also traded themselves. The long-term goal is to support regulated currency exchange with depth and liquidity, eliminating the need to manually wrangle multiple orders or exploit contracts to avoid fees. Each category comes with its own challenges. We prioritize reforms based on their friction, economic impact, and player feedback. Which categories cause the most friction for you? Let us know on the Discord, the forums, or in space, or through your elected CSM representatives. It's kind of looked like CCP was looking to update it with the new player contracts in the opportunities window, but it's in a weird place for that. Yeah, it's true, and like I think that part of this is running into the issue of like agile development within Eve, right? Where like you kind of see increasing fragmentation of what UI is used for what, based on what's being focused on. This is why I've always said that, we should kind of condense things like opportunities, show info, and agency into one UI and have it be Aura, which becomes kind of your go-to place, but it is what it is. Okay, friction-free trade for PLEX. PLEX is unique in gaming history. From its inception to its role as New Eden's foundational currency, it represents one of the boldest experiments in player-driven economy design and CCP's commitment to supporting it. PLEX is also a cornerstone of EVE's free-to-play model and its most frequently traded utility item. However, its market is not as effective as we'd like due to several factors. But my hesitation is there are now, like, PLEX was revolutionary when it came out, but now other games, like WoW even has a token that's very similar to PLEX. So, it's not unique at this point, but it is, they were the first. And here's the important thing. Due to the other natures of EVE Online, the destructibility of things, the lack of permanence in EVE, etc., PLEX has worked in EVE in a way that has been incredibly destructive in other games. For a lot of the same things that we were talking about before, where, like, as soon as you start putting real-life value on in-game currencies, like the ability to turn ISK into game time through PLEX, you start to run into some problems. Like, for instance, in WoW, so, like, Final Fantasy XIV doesn't have a token like WoW. And a lot of people see this as a good thing. Because WoW, a lot of people look at the token that was added into WoW and see it as a destructive force because it gave this, like, intrinsic value to gold that really hyper amplified all of the problems with gold inflation that they had prior to that. And so people have expressed that, like, having something like a WoW token in Final Fantasy XIV would be destructive to Final Fantasy XIV. And yet it's not destructive to EVE Online. And that's because in games like Final Fantasy XIV and WoW, progress is permanent, right? Once you gain a new piece of gear, once you gain some additional amount of power in the game, once you've progressed in some way in the game, that is permanent. Nothing can take that from you. Whereas in EVE, nothing is permanent. Everything is ephemeral. And so this prevents things like PLEX from being a, buying power kind of thing, right? I wouldn't necessarily consider EVE pay to win because PLEX exists. I like to joke that it's pay to have a much more expensive kill mail, right? If somebody who doesn't know anything about EVE pays $1,000 and buys themselves a new super, all they're really doing is setting themselves up for failure, right? Whereas in WoW, if you buy some big, nice, fancy gear or mount or whatever, like, nothing will ever take that effectiveness from you. The only thing that can happen is it be made obsolete by Blizzard or whoever introducing a new item that is even stronger. So you see power creep and this kind of treadmill effect, whereas in EVE, as I mentioned before, if you built a Roke in 2008, that's still a Roke and it's still good. Neverwinter does this through Zen Market. There's, especially on PC, just stockpiles the main currency, just waiting to be turned into Zen by wallet warriors. Last time I looked, it was 6-month turnaround. Yeah, exactly. It's a problem. It's a problem in other games that the nature of EVE manages to make it resistant to. This is why EVE was able to transition to a free-to-play game without changing much about the fundamentals of the game itself. Because EVE has things that are true about the nature of its economy that are not true about other MMOs. And so other MMOs have to figure out ways to get around these things, where EVE just kind of lets it be what it is. All right. It is a safe investment, much like gold, having both intrinsic and extrinsic value, being the only item in the game directly tied to real-world currency. This is why I was talking about earlier, where people just kind of assume that PLEX is a very good investment. It may not always keep going up, but it certainly, like, PLEX has never crashed in the history of EVE that I know of. So it's a very good way to store your value, if nothing else. It lives in the vault and is usable from anywhere, but could be bought regionally. It behaves like a currency in design, but like a speculative asset in practice. It does not bear any cost of capital. CCP has no interest rates on debt, wealth taxes, nor inventory costs. There's no competition for investment like the stock market or bond market. So yeah, you can hold on to Plex forever and just wait for it to come back to being valuable. Its market is shallow, clustered in trade hubs like the Forge, Domain, Metropolis, Sync Liaison, and Hematar. Like I said, like even before when they did this last time, they solved the problem by letting you just trade in JITA. It's still happening in JITA, right? It's simply the easiest and best way to store capital in both the short and the long term. That's absolutely true. But that will have all the downsides of people being dissatisfied with wealth taxes. Yeah, that would be an incredibly unpopular, like that would be a very dangerous solution, right? Like anything involving like adding new limits on how much you can store in a structure or a wealth tax of any kind in EVE. Like this is one of those things that we were talking about when it comes to Frontiers, where it's like the player base is so cemented in their ways at this point. It's a what 22-year-old game almost at this point. So like you just couldn't get away with that anymore. Like think about like even just adding the idea that structures could become abandoned was so controversial. But people were able to get over it because, you know, people like me reminded everybody that they warned us from the very beginning that it wasn't necessarily going to be protected forever. But like adding a cap on how much you could have or a wealth tax would be, it's not even a matter of technical issue at that point. It's completely a design issue where like, how would you even manage that? How would you decide how to handle all the edge cases? What would you do with the extra stuff? It would make make way more problems than it would solve, basically. Yeah, New York tried something like that and all the rich people left. Yeah, well, I mean, they could apply it to all of New Eden and then like where are you going to go? But at the same time, it doesn't, I don't think it would, it doesn't fix anything. If anything, it just kind of shunts the bleeding. We've started increasing Plex supplies through daily goals, events, and other means, but one structural issue remained. Capsuleers couldn't easily buy or fairly sell Plex outside of the major hubs. Yeah, I mean, people have JITA alts to be able to buy and sell stuff, but not everybody has it. That, you know, when you're talking about friction, that would, yeah, where would you go? Somewhere else, in a different game. Maybe Frontier. No. The idea of having to have another JITA, like having a JITA alt, is a barrier to entry that does preclude a lot of people from engaging in it. And, you know, people have that choice. It does take a little bit of extra work. And more importantly, like, there's a certain amount of disassociation of identity. There are a lot of players that like play with one character. And so the idea of having a JITA alt is just alien to their brain. And, you know, while you could say, well, just do it, like, their gameplay isn't invalid. Why are you punishing them for having a character and not wanting to have a second one that's just in JITA? The solution: introducing the global Plex market. Later this summer, CCP loves... We are in the era of this is coming, but not right now. I swear to God. Anyway, later this summer, we'll be launching a region-agnostic market for Plex. That means all Plex buy and sell orders are pooled into a global region, a single virtual location accessible from everywhere, no traveling required. Bought Plex is still delivered to your vault, no hauling needed as before. Location and standings-based listing taxes and fees won't change for now, which is weird, because, like, how's that going to work? Whose taxes is it going to be based off of? And trading from private structures will remain the same for now. I guess it's wherever you happen to be. That's what you happen to use. Trading from private structures will remain the same for now. You can trade, sell, buy within that structure. So, like, basically, the listing fees and everything is all the same, but instead of being listed in that one structure, it's instead listed in the global market. Fair. This will make it much easier to acquire Plex from anywhere. whether it's to buy Omega, manufacture skins, or buy anything from the New Eden store, while making it much likelier that there's a competitive market for those who want to sell their Plex, especially in smaller amounts. We expect this change to boost Plex liquidity, enable conditions that move us closer to a healthy, fair market equilibrium, encourage broader Plex adoption across the game, and reduce price disparities and improve availability. You know what? I have a fifth prediction with this. And I think that this is actually, in my opinion, the best one. This is another huge blow to JITA, right? JITA is like the universal market, and all things kind of flow towards JITA. And having these secondary markets has always been kind of this challenge, right? And the thing is that while you can buy your ship and your fitting in Dodixie or in Heck or in Renz or in Amar, if you're trying to buy a skin or if you're trying to buy Plex, you just know you need to go to JITA because that's the place where everything kind of flows to. And so Plex is like the biggest commodity traded in the game. A huge amount of the volume of trade happens around Plex. And so those two facts come together to make JITA remain locked in as this place that, like, even if you want to trade in Heck and Renz and Amar or Dodixie, you still have to, like, deal with JITA because that's where the stuff is. And the biggest stuff that's there is Plex. And so decoupling this from JITA is going to help make it so that you don't actually have to rely on JITA for these things anymore. You know, you could just work in your own trade hub knowing that if you need to buy Plex, you can just buy it where you want to be. This is a huge blow to JITA as a trade hub, which, in my opinion, is a great thing. I honestly, personally believe that that might be the most useful piece of all of this to me. Now, I'm not saying that any of this is not true. I'm just saying, like, I think that is a big, big deal. How many traders are currently in Perimeter and JITA solely and exclusively to buy and sell Plex? There's a lot of them. There's a lot of them. And now they don't need to be there anymore. And that is pretty cool. We recognize that this change will reduce some regional arbitrage and speculation opportunities, but we believe that the benefits outweigh the drawbacks, so we will closely monitor the outcomes and prepare to adjust as needed. The global Plex market will be available in Singularity for testing on 1600 UTC on the 27th of June, which is now? Wait, is that true? Hold on. I can't. Hold on. That's a Jeff says one of the things I wanted the CCSP add was an alliance to name their systems. That would make great ISK sync and allow. I think that that's true. I think that that should be a thing that people can do with their their infrastructure hub. Can I log into Singularity right now? Sissy's open. Sissy's open, guys. Breaking news. No, yeah, that's probably the low key the biggest thing in this whole announcement. All right, Singularity for testing on the 27th of June until the 30th of June. Jump in and share your feedback. As part of the release to Tranquility, all existing orders will be canceled and fees reimbursed. The exact date will be announced ahead of release. So we invite everyone to test order creation, modification, and cancellation in stations and structures across New Eden on Singularity to get prepared for the fully benefits when the unified market when they arrive. We believe that there are more ways to reduce the overall trade friction in New Eden, and we will continue to explore those. The global market for Plex is both a stepping stone and a learning opportunity, which always goes well together. With your feedback shared on Discord, the forums, or wherever you fly, come join the conversation. Plex market feels weird with no locations. I mean, it feels weird right now, but I think it's something that we'll get used to. Yeah, unfortunately, that's true. So I'll post it. There's the link. Oh my God, don't do this. So basically no one will be able to use markets apart. No one will use any other markets apart from the Peri 0% market. What are you fucking talking about? It's the opposite of that. Like right now, everybody has to go to the perimeter market in order to do this. Now you can do it locally with your own market. Now you can put up a Fortizar in a wormhole and then put a trade hub in it and then sell your Plex without ever leaving the wormhole. What are you talking about? It's the exact opposite.